In the early hours of November 15th, 2024, in Joliet, Illinois, an emergency call disrupted the calm of a quiet and temporarily chaotic apartment building. At 4 a.m., an angry woman called the police, demanding they evict a man she claimed was trespassing in her living space. What quickly escalated into a dramatic confrontation was marked by accusations, rage, and physical resistance, turning the hallways of the apartment building into a stage for a story that was unbelievable yet true. What initially seemed like a minor dispute between two neighbors soon became the climax of a chaotic, intense breakup. The situation began with vague and unclear accusations as the woman insisted that a man was violating her living space, unnecessarily escalating the tension. However, what truly complicated and shocked everyone were the absurd and implausible details that followed. A harmless flashlight was mistaken for a weapon, and unfounded accusations about the man possessing a gun and threatening the safety of other residents were made without any convincing evidence. A sense of confusion and ambiguity overwhelmed the situation, as the woman claimed the man was violating building policies, even though her words seemed unfounded. Within hours, the situation the police were trying to handle grew unpredictable and far beyond their expectations. Watching the scene unfold, it was clear that not only was there physical chaos, but there was also an emotional struggle taking place. The woman's explosive reactions, from shouting to extreme behavior, suggested she was battling not only the man, but also her own sense of insecurity and fear. The police, who had to remain calm in this volatile situation, faced continual resistance, suspicion, and unreasonable demands. These unexpected elements challenged the patience and problem-solving abilities of law enforcement to the highest degree, creating a chaotic and unforgettable scene. At 4 a.m., when most people were still deep in their sleep, and the city of Joliet, Illinois, seemed to be enjoying the peaceful moments of the early morning, an emergency call shattered the tranquility of the residential area. Amid this calm, an unnamed woman, seemingly unable to control her emotions, called 911. Her voice was filled with panic and anger, as if she were facing an immediate danger. She insisted that an intruder was present in her building and made it clear that this was not a misunderstanding, but a serious violation of the privacy and security of the residents. Her call to the police was more than just a plea for help. It clearly reflected extreme tension, with her words growing more frantic and uncontrollable. Her voice not only contained fear, but also determination, as though she was confronting an undeniable threat. When she insisted that there was an intruder, her words painted a vivid picture of the tense situation she was living in. Her calling 911 at this moment showed an urgency and panic so intense that she couldn't wait any longer. All these elements combined to create an explosive situation, not just for the woman, but for the entire surrounding community, marking the beginning of a dramatic and unexpected event. The man she accused in this incident, notably, was no stranger, but her ex-boyfriend, which immediately introduced a highly personal and dramatic element to the situation. The complexity deepens when she claims that not only did he violate her personal space and property, but he also directly threatened her safety by carrying a weapon, which she described as extremely dangerous. Her frantic accusation paints a picture of an intensely dramatic and high-stakes scene, one that could easily be imagined as a tense, action-packed Hollywood thriller where the characters are perpetually on the edge of danger. However, the truth behind her accusation took a surprisingly absurd and humorous turn. The weapon she described in panic turned out to be nothing more than an ordinary flashlight, an innocuous item that, in the heat of the moment, became the center of unnecessary fear. This revelation not only diminishes the seriousness of the accusation, but also highlights the emotional instability and excessive stress she was under, prompting one to question the accuracy of the claims in such a highly charged personal situation. Her description of the situation, delivered with fervor and bitterness, not only raised doubts about the actual severity of the event, but also sparked suspicions about the hidden motivations behind the emergency call. Her words were not simply a recounting of an incident, but seemed more like a high-tension warning, suggesting that this was not just an issue of security or privacy violation, but the climax of a deep personal vendetta stemming from a broken relationship. It seemed as though she was not only seeking to protect her rights, but also looking for revenge, expressing her anger and sense of betrayal. Was this truly a highly emotional act of retribution, manifested in her dramatic language and hostile actions? Or was it merely an accidental security dispute in a shared apartment complex? When the police received the emergency call in the early hours of the morning, they could not have been unaware of the complicated nature of the situation as soon as they arrived. This was not a simple violation. It was an emotionally charged confrontation where the truth and perceptions of each person involved were clouded by personal feelings. With each step into this story, the officers were not just facing a routine security issue, but had to decipher the delicate interpersonal conflicts within a complex narrative of relationships, pride, and unresolved wounds. Upon arriving at the scene, the woman immediately shifted from her angry state to a dramatic performance, one that she had likely rehearsed in her mind for a long time. "He doesn't live here!" she screamed, her fingers shaking as she pointed directly at a man in pajamas who appeared completely unfazed. Her next accusation added to the growing drama. She claimed he was shacking up with another woman in the building, a betrayal that was unforgivable in her eyes, and this had apparently violated the building policy. It was hard to determine which policy had been broken at 4 a.m. in an apartment building, but for this woman, it seemed as though all rules had been torn apart. Her shouting echoed through the hallways, waking up most of the residents, except for the accused man in pajamas. Strangely, he maintained a calm demeanor, seemingly unaffected by the emotional storm surrounding him. Meanwhile, the woman did not limit herself to accusations. She escalated the situation by questioning the police and insisting that his presence was not just illegal, but also a potential threat. Yet, the man's excessively calm reaction made everything feel even stranger. It was as if he were a spectator in his own soap opera, raising unspoken questions. Was this a survival instinct from an innocent man, or had he become too accustomed to such performances? As the situation escalated, it was clear that this was not just a simple dispute between neighbors. Instead, it resembled a perfectly rehearsed tragedy, with the main characters caught in a tense confrontation while the audience, the entire building, watched as they awoke from their short, early morning slumber. In an attempt to resolve the tension, the police officers tried to ease the atmosphere by listening to both sides. However, the woman firmly stuck to her narrative. She insisted that she had lived there for 6 years, and the appearance of her ex was nothing short of a crime against humanity, or at least a serious violation of the building's regulations. When asked to provide proof of residency, she immediately retorted with a self-righteous and somewhat angry response. "I don't need proof. Everyone knows I live here." This attitude left the officers puzzled, yet they continued asking questions. Meanwhile, a curious neighbor peered out from behind their door, only to immediately slam it shut, muttering tiredly, "Again, huh?" The situation grew more chaotic as the woman repeatedly emphasized that she was the only one following the rules in the building. She loudly accused her ex of not only violating the regulations but also endangering the safety of the residents. Her increasingly harsh words made the officers realize that this was not just an argument, it was an emotional crisis that had spiraled out of control. Amid all of this, the woman's intense determination and the hesitant reactions of the neighbors created an atmosphere that was both tense and odd. The officers present seemed to take on the role of unwilling referees in a battle where the participants appeared to follow no rules except for shouting. As the officers delayed taking action, the woman's fury only intensified, and her accusations grew even more serious. She screamed, "He has a gun, and there are kids here." In reality, there were no children, just a cat with a disgruntled expression watching the scene unfold from a nearby window, its gaze seemingly accusing the world for breaking its peace. Despite the officer's best efforts to defuse the situation, she continued to explode like a contestant on a reality TV show, desperately fighting for a spot in the final. Criticisms and insults flowed incessantly, drowning out any explanation or reasoning from the officers, as if her words had become a storm of sound, rendering any attempt at de-escalation futile. She accused the man not only of being a threat, but also of endangering the entire building, while still refusing to provide clear evidence or cooperate with the police. The tension escalated with each passing minute, as her incoherent outbursts continuously overshadowed any rational attempts to address the situation. The officers, more patient than anyone could have imagined, tried to listen and offer calming advice. But it seemed their efforts only served to make her more agitated. At this point, the situation had transcended a mere confrontation. It had turned into a dramatic monologue, with lines that she probably rehearsed in her mind long before the incident. From a certain perspective, This event was not just a personal dispute, but rather an emotional performance, where the woman was not only the lead actor but also the writer and director, transforming the entire scene into an unforgettable narrative for all present. Her actions were not merely reactions to a security violation, but rather an emotional outpouring, an attempt to reclaim control over a situation that had spiraled out of her hands. When the officers decided it was time to arrest her, the situation unexpectedly escalated in a way no one could have anticipated. From someone embroiled in a heated argument, she suddenly transformed into a violent whirlwind of resistance, shouting, "Don't touch me!" in a tone that was both defiant and panicked. In her frantic state, she flailed wildly, her limbs moving uncontrollably, making any attempts by the officers to subdue her incredibly difficult. The climax of the scene occurred when she unexpectedly lunged at one of the officers in a manner that could only be described as a blend of action movie drama and slapstick comedy. While screaming assertively, "This is my hallway!" she tried to bite the officer's arm, leaving him both stunned and confused. In pain, but still trying to stay calm, the officer muttered in a mix of helplessness and disbelief, "She's biting me. She's actually biting me." Witnesses at the scene couldn't help but feel that the situation had veered into the realm of the absurd. The shouting, the chaotic flailing, and the police's attempts to subdue her created a scene that was both chaotic and surprisingly humorous. Despite the gravity of the situation, her exaggerated reactions and bizarre behavior made it feel more like a theatrical performance than a real arrest. Her attempt to bite not only inflicted minor injury on the officer, but also escalated the seriousness of the situation. As a result, the officers were forced to take stronger measures to ensure everyone's safety and maintain control of a situation that was quickly spiraling out of control. The journey to the jail continued to unfold like a dramatic spectacle. With her hands cuffed, the woman relentlessly complained about the tightness of the handcuffs, as if that were the root of the problem. Interspersed with her complaints were cries of distress, shouts for her rights, and vague threats aimed at the officers. "I called you guys here to help me," she screamed, as if she were the sole victim in the entire situation, despite the fact that everything had started because of her own out-of-control actions. In a complete state of panic, the woman continued to make bizarre demands. She requested to meet the CEO of the officers, though no one had any idea who or what she was referring to. One of her requests was even more absurd. She wanted the police to not only escort her ex-boyfriend out of the apartment, but also send him into a time machine to ensure he never met his new girlfriend. Her nonsensical words and defiant attitude turned every minute on the way to the jail into a test for the officers. They tried to stay calm and soothe the situation, but she kept resisting, stretching out the ordeal as if she were trying to make herself the center of the universe. The police, while trying to do their job, had to constantly reassure her that everything would be handled properly, even though it was clear that this was no straightforward trip. Under the dim streetlights of early morning, the police drove toward the jail, not only carrying a suspect, but also a whirlwind of complex emotions and demands that no one could easily fulfill. Ultimately, the woman was charged with disorderly conduct, 2 counts of battery on a police officer, and 1 count of resisting arrest. At her preliminary trial, she pleaded not guilty, insisting, "This is just a misunderstanding. I was the one who called the police for help." While the case is still pending, her defense has sparked much controversy. On one hand, she portrays herself as a victim of misunderstanding, overly emotional, in a tense situation. On the other hand, body cam footage clearly shows a series of actions that are hard to justify, from verbal disputes and verbal assaults to resisting arrest and even attempting to bite an officer. Beyond the legal charges, the situation also highlights the strained relationships between her and other residents in the building. Some neighbors described her as a ticking time bomb, while others suggested that her anger may have been exacerbated by personal pressures. Currently, not only has her reputation been severely damaged, but her ability to continue living in the apartment complex is also in question. The incident has become a topic of much discussion in Joliet, not only because of its comedic and satirical nature, but also because it exposes how uncontrolled emotions can quickly escalate into a complex legal crisis. In the end, this story is not just a personal conflict, but a stark reminder of the consequences that can arise from unchecked emotions. In situations of conflict, especially in complex relationships like breakups, it's easy for emotions to overpower reason, leading to decisions that can ruin not only relationships, but also have legal repercussions. The key lesson from this incident is the importance of remaining calm and finding ways to resolve conflicts peacefully, rather than letting negative emotions dictate actions. Whether in a difficult situation or a heated dispute, patience and rationality are always the keys to avoiding undesirable outcomes, especially when dealing with law enforcement.